You are listening to TheFederal. This is Shubha Kirtana. On today's podcast, we are going to talk about the Supreme Court's recent stance on refusing to entertain plea on the concept of menstrual leave. Interestingly, they have called it a policy matter. So not all women can put on a strong face, endure the pain to show up at work when they're having our period. The mood swings and physical weakness that many experience during their period are something that we can all imagine. Today we have with us Ms. Akila, advocate based out of Chennai. Thank you so much, Akila, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
The first question I would like to ask you is that, is there a proper legal infrastructure in India to allow women the right to take a menstrual leave?
Right. I think few ways in which we can look at this. One is, of course, our constitutional infrastructure does exist which recognizes equality, right? That men and women are equal and we have the right to access the same opportunities. So reading from that, yes, where we have a right to equality, laws and policies should ensure that women are able to access these opportunities in a meaningful manner. So if at all, there are certain circumstances that render women working in certain spaces, making it difficult or inaccessible, that should be remedied, and such, provisions and accommodations should be provided in law. So when it comes to the Constitution and broader principle of it, yes, we do have the infrastructure. Whereas when it comes to, actual laws that exist, we have very piecemeal sort of labor laws. So you have like one set of laws which would, speak about conditions at a factory, or, you're working in an industry. When it comes to the unorganized sector, it's a far more sort of less defined space, and it feels as if, it's almost lawless. So is there an existing law or a policy which says women should be entitled to or are entitled to menstrual leave? No. But can it be done? Yes.
Right. So that makes me ask you a question about the status of the menstruation benefit bill that was tabled by a member of parliament from Arunachal Pradesh, and this has happened in 2017. And also interestingly, data says that Bihar is the only state in India that has government-approved period leave. And all of this is in words, but what is the practical situation? What is the reality?
Right. Reality is that there seems to be pockets of regulation that allows for some amount of menstrual leave. So what we see is that apparently Kerala has brought in some extent of menstrual leave in education sector. We come across news, and again, not much information is available on the public domain about how this actually worked out. That Bihar had enacted some kind of policy way back in 1992 that allowed for menstrual leave. But again, like I said, information regarding how it worked, whether or not women employees knew of this benefit and whether they availed it, is completely unknown. So, like I said, there are pockets of regulation. There have been attempts, as we see, which work back at least to 2017, where, independent legislators have been trying to make this issue more prominent. And I think every sort of act of, private member bill should be seen as that, right? Whether or not it receives, legislative approval, it should spark a debate. What is disappointing is that, prior to this PIL, I don't think there's been a lot of debate or discussion on this issue at all. So, there have been independent proposals, and we also see a few private companies permitting for menstrual leave. But right now, the sort of regulation is such that you can avail of general sick leave, and this seems to sort of come under that.
Right. Right. So those who are not in favor of the policy, they say that it will only prejudice employers against hiring women and lead to their alienation at work. So how do you see this?
That could be a possible knee-jerk response. because the initial impulse always is, one that goes with our general patriarchal ideas, right? Of men deserving opportunities and spaces, and that women somehow should fit into those existing molds. So I can very well understand that, and I think the Supreme Court had also sort of, had spoken about this as an apprehension that this may, having a broad policy or nationwide law on menstrual leave may actually be a disincentive and may, force women out of employment because employers may prefer male employees, etc. It could be a knee-jerk response, but we see that such knee-jerk responses are a part of existing reality itself, right? There are still employers who hesitate at employing young women of marriageable childbearing age. There are existing employers who look at maternity benefit as, a burden rather than a statutory duty and a moral duty. However, I think it's important to look past this and understand that women have a right to be there, and that proactive measures need to be taken. And, any extra cost that the employer is incurring, it actually adds to their organization itself.
Right. Okay. What kind of menstrual leave policies are in place globally? I mean, a couple of examples, or if you could tell us.
Right. So a few countries have taken this issue up. I believe Korea, Taiwan, Spain have enacted laws on menstrual leave. So it could be anywhere from, 1 to 2 days per month. But so it does exist. Now, what should we follow? I think on the one hand, yes, it's a policy decision. Are you going to allow for 1 day, whether it's 2 days? But I think this is a small part of a much larger debate that we need to
100%,
have
yes,
on access to health and on public health and women's health in particular, right? So we need to see this as an essential part of non-discrimination, of allowing women and sort of having a facilitative and welcome sort of space. So I think it's more than, whether you're going to allow 1 day or 2 days. What is important is recognition of the fact that, biologically there is a separate sort of need, a separate sort of circumstances which needs to be acknowledgement of that. Plus, I think more importantly, ensuring that there is no victimization over somebody availing of this. Because, and I think that plays into the apprehension that everybody else was speaking about. Okay, such a law or a policy exists, but will women be, able to fearlessly avail of this leave? Because, and there is a lot of, again, women at every stage are having to fight to be seen and to be taken seriously.
Heard, especially, to be heard.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think it would be important to make sure that, there should not be any retaliation for availing such a leave. Acknowledgement that this is a part of their right. So to me, the acknowledgement is more important than, actual leave itself.
Right. Yeah. Another concern that has been voiced on social media, Akila, is that the menstrual leave policies might discriminate against men, as women would get additional days off every year.
Right. Well, I am actually, it's difficult for me to even respond to that, because I think it's one of those knee-jerk reactions of considering like your the mainstream as and the main rule as being one that is for men, right? When you consider health, you consider sort of men and their biology and their like emotional, physical needs as the prototype, and women are somehow the exception, right, or the rider.
100%.
And you try to provide like the basic common minimum that you can get away with. Instead, if you understand women as forming or having to form at least 50% of your workforce, then I think we would frame the debate very differently. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. Does it discriminate against men? No. But if they do have similar menstrual problems, then well, they can also avail of it. So, I think it's a very facetious sort of argument there. But I think also important then perhaps to speak about transgenders, right? Who definitely have
I was just about to ask you that. Yes.
Yeah, who then have a valid claim to this. So in law, we understand the right to sort of self-identify our gender. So you may have menstruating persons who identify as male or as a third transgender. And I think when we formulate a policy or law, it should definitely take into account, such like a trans person's, right and biology as well. So, if a person identifies as male or transgender but does menstruate, then yes, they should also be allowed to avail of this leave or any other benefits that they
Right. Is there the right way to implement the policy? Of course, merely designing such a policy is meaningless, for its implementation to be effective. It must be introduced alongside the measures to increase the participation of women in the workforce and make our workplaces more gender sensitive. So how do we go about that?
Absolutely. It is only a small part of, I think, a larger acknowledgement that women belong in the public space. Women can occupy any space they want. They can, participate in, economic activity any way in which they want, right? So, how can we actuate this?
Yes.
Well, there have been a few of positive laws in the past few decades, like the prevention of sexual harassment, the prohibition of sexual harassment. Sexual Harassment Act is one of those progressive legislations which also included the unorganized sector, which provided for important protection. So you could have, complaints and inquiry process into instances of sexual harassment. So, anything that speaks of menstrual leave, a possible law or a policy, should definitely take into account existing realities and, understand where it is that women work. So something that would apply across sort of industry lines and across organized, unorganized sector lines. Something that should definitely be accompanied and probably even preceded by, sensitization measures to ensure that there is enough literacy about public health, literacy about rights and equality, and literacy about sanitation. I think all of this should go together and accompany such a measure. And I think it would be a fantastic thing, because we shouldn't just look at this in terms of, like a small legislation. We should see this as a part of important measures to make the workplace equitable.
100%. Akila, I would like to ask you another question about labor laws. What do they tell? I mean, why can't Indian labor laws engage with the argument about menstruation, which is also part of the reproductive identity?
Right. They can and they should. Unfortunately, it has been left out, perhaps because this is considered a taboo topic, perhaps because, most of our legislators are men and they did not consider this important enough. It has been an invisible issue, right? And it's only over the past few years that it has been gaining traction. And frankly, I think it's because it's gaining traction globally is the reason why we are having this conversation now. Because of our sort of general idea that, we need to first make sure that there is, some formal opportunity that is accessible to women. So now the question is, how do we move past that? Now, most sectors are open to women. The question is, how do you make the workplace more equitable and more, and facilitate and be more welcoming? So I think this is the next step that we should start talking about.
Right. And my last question to you. post-COVID, the expansion of remote work may also play a role in how willing or unwilling a worker may be to take up this policy, even in an environment where they feel supported. So, how do you see this?
That's a very good question, and I don't have an answer to it, except I may throw a couple more sort of questions.
Yeah, because I mean, why I asked you is that I'm sorry to interrupt you here.
Sure.
I had spoken with 8 to 9 female HR professionals to just have an understanding of how the system in place works. So they told me that women don't come on a regular basis, so that's a gray area for that matter. So they can maybe relax and then take a comp off, or maybe they can work and then they can compensate. So they were using this word compensate a lot more than, a lot more often. So they never said women are entitled for this. They always, they were saying, "Illa compensation, na compensate panikla." So it's a very great thing.
Right. Also, I just want to add it, very valid, right? Like, I just want to add that work from home option does not exist for a large section of women employees.
Yes.
Right? Again, take for example a daily laborer. Take for example somebody in the unorganized sector. They can't work from home, and and what we know from reality, from general anecdote statistics, is that women occupy, like very few women occupy sort of leadership positions or management positions, which come with flexi work options, right? A lot of women, a majority of women, I would think, are in, even those who are employed, are in positions where they have to mark their presence every day and have to account for every hour to be given a salary, to be taken seriously. So flexi work is not always an option, of course, in service sector, and perhaps in the middle class it does exist. But again, this also sort of takes us to the idea that working from home is somehow easier, right? Because what we saw during COVID is that working hours have gotten longer. 100%. Working from home is not much easier, and given that women at home have extra responsibilities. So on the one hand, you may think, all right, like 1 to 1.5 hours of my day is freed up because I don't have to commute. But you have the additional responsibility of mostly, right, being the caretaker at home, having to care for, other family members, your children, be in charge of domestic.
It's a huge responsibility, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So to think that working from home is going to necessarily ease their burden, I may not completely agree with. So, it's like I said, I don't have a solution, but it is that when a person is allowed to work from home, it is still working. I don't think you can count that as
it is no more work from home. It is living at work. It's
yes, exactly. So in some ways, you're probably just compounding, their work and their responsibility.
Cool. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation, Akila. It was nice having you with us.
Thank you, Shruti,
on this podcast.